Welcome to Performance Mesh, the third edition of our new podcast. My co-host and I, Eric Manis, are joined by a very special guest today. I'm John O'Neill, and today we have on Doug Kechijian. Doug, how you doing today?
Doing great. Excited to chat with you guys for the inaugural guest edition here.
And not only is our first guest, it's our first guest who has a birthday today. So happy birthday, Doug.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of stars have aligned, I guess, for this first guest episode.
Yeah, I think we're gonna make sure that it's always somebody's birthday when we interview them. So.
Yeah, you're gonna run out of guests pretty quick.
yeah. And to celebrate your birthday, I have a delicious chipwich that I found in my freezer. It's pretty festive. It has sprinkles and mini M&Ms on the side. So cheers to you, Doug. Happy birthday.
That's great. I should have eaten my birthday cake on this. You know, that was a bad job on my part.
What's in the birthday cake? What kind of birthday cake does Doug Kechijian eat?
It was a chocolate cake. My wife knows my taste very well, and she picked a great cake, but it's gotta be chocolate.
Okay,
Chocolate
Everything.
Oh wow.
I mean, if she got something that had some chocolate and maybe like some yellow cake, like that'd be fine too. But if there's no chocolate, then you got no shot. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So
I'm a white guy.
Yeah, I mean, not on my birthday.
Yeah.
So I'm the same way when it comes to cakes. I know Doug and I have a lot in common eating. Apparently, we have this difference. So I am white and white, just like you, Eric.
Apparently, I'm a pickier eater than you, that's saying something based on the scale that you sent us.
We're gonna get into it.
Yeah. So Doug, a lot of people know you from the work you've put out the last probably 5 to 10 years with Resilient PT. What they don't know about you is your eating habits. All right, so we're gonna get right to it. Walk us through Monday. So you wake up tomorrow. What does tomorrow look like in a day of eating?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because Monday wouldn't be that much different from Tuesday, from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's probably like one day where there's some deviation. Maybe the weekend's a little bit because I have more time to eat. Tomorrow's a rough day because I've got I'm treating from 9 to 7 straight. But I'm gonna try to stick to my normal kind of like eating, routine. So I'll just say like on a typical day, right? During the week, get up. I'll have an RX bar. I'll have some frozen blueberries with a little bit of unsweetened cocoa powder because I can eat that quickly. That's like 10 minutes. That's down the gullet. I can get in the shower, hop on the train, and head to work. And plus, like when I wake up, I don't want to have like too big a meal. Like I'm not ready for that yet. Then I, depending on the Metro North is on time, I usually get to the office like 20 minutes before the first patient. I'll wolf down like 2 peanut butter sandwiches. Teddy's peanut butter is my favorite. I know they have that in New England. If you haven't had it, John, I don't know if you like peanut butter or not, but Teddy's Chunky is my favorite. On Dave's Good Seed Killer Bread. So 2 sandwiches, 4 pieces of bread, peanut butter. And then for lunch, if I have the luxury of eating lunch, I'll have 2 cans of Safe Catch tuna fish. I go with a couple of different flavors. I rotate between the chili lime and the Cajun, but 2 cans of that. And then either a bowl of oatmeal or a bowl of grape nuts. So that's lunch. The 2 cans of tuna, grape nuts, or oatmeal. And then go home. Dinner is usually half a cup of lentils, half a cup of this Trader Joe's grain mix that has like couscous, quinoa, some other stuff in it. Half a pound of some kind of lean meat. So whether it's like some kind of beef, or I have elk, venison, buffalo. Kind of rotate with that. Some spices. So like either I usually put some garlic in it. Some cumin powder, some chili pepper flakes, and then some kind of like hot sauce. A little bit of, I have this from Costco, this like avocado mash, kind of like these little guacamole packs. Put some of that in, a little olive oil, Instapot, 12 minutes after it warms up, and it's delicious. And that's pretty much it.
You lost John on all this spice. John is not a spice guy, as you can tell by his complexion. But you lost him on the.
I have made chili for John, and he ate it though. I made a similar concoction for John, and he actually ate it. And people like, really? I love how we went right into this. Like, very little introduction. I mean, a lot of podcasts I've done, including the one that I host, you kind of like give people a feel for what it's going to be. Like this is totally spontaneous, and people might not care at all about what we're talking about, but the fact that you guys want to expose some of the things that are very, very odd about me, right away, and I'm not scared to talk about it because you meet people, and it's like, oh yeah, like your story inspired me to tell my story, So.
And the funny thing is, you guys are, obviously professional and incredible at what you do, but you're also two of the weirdest people that I know and who I'm friends with. So it's good, a lot of people, and people listen to the podcast, they probably heard your story a bunch of times, Doug, but we want to know the real Doug.
That's the real. And so that's the routine. I mean, we can elaborate if you have any questions on that. But I'll get to what I'm sure you guys want the audience to know, because if we're going to talk about, like, it's one thing to say, okay, this guy's like he pretty much eats the same thing every day, but I'm sure what's going to be also equally not fascinating, but like people are going to want to know what I don't eat, and that's a lot of things. And the main thing is vegetables. So
are there any vegetables that you do like?
I mean, there's some semantics as to what a vegetable is. And I know you guys don't want to do a whole episode on that, but like pretty much anything green, I can't remember the last time I ever ate. I mean, my parents tell me that like when I was like very young, before I have any recollection of this, probably when I was like still being fed by adults, that I ate vegetables and I ate green things. I can't remember the last time I ate something like that, like no salad. Yeah, I mean, like, is a potato a vegetable? Because that's it. And like tomato sauce, something like a salsa or a tomato sauce. But like I wouldn't actually eat a tomato, but I would eat something with tomato sauce or salsa.
So what I want to know is two things, okay? Because this is what I struggle with as a picky eater. One, when was the last time you were at a restaurant and you looked at the menu and you said, "There's nothing here I would eat. I'm over the entire menu." Okay. That's question part one. Question part two is, when was the last time you were either at a restaurant or got takeout and you were like, you know what, this isn't what I asked for. I got to send it back or I got to make myself something else.
The answer to the second question is that's happened in the last 2 months. And that's because I felt like there was kind of some false advertising with the description of the dish. It was a pasta dish. But there wasn't anything in it that I explicitly like wouldn't eat. It just wasn't as good as I thought that it was going to be, but I paid for it. I ate it. Like by the time I got home and I realized that it was not what I expected, I wasn't going to go back and get it was like, 9:00 at night. And if it was something that I just didn't want to eat, I would have just made my own dinner. Like I'm not going to bother the restaurant. And I feel like, if you complain, even if you're in the right, you're kind of rolling the dice with what you're going to get back. We've all seen the movie Waiting. And like, a lot of these restaurants are restaurants that I frequent. So if they mess up one time, like I'll just take the loss, and I'm not trying to, ruffle any feathers with that. The first question, I can't remember the last time I went to a restaurant and wouldn't eat. I mean, usually you go to, so a lot of times, like if I'm going to agree to go to a restaurant, I'll check the menu. So I kind of do my homework there. It's very rare that I would like spontaneously go to a restaurant without having any idea what they would serve. And most restaurants, they'll have like, you can get a baked potato and like some kind of a meat. And that's like kind of my safe, or like some kind of like rice and a meat. You're usually safe to be able to get that. So that hasn't happened in a while, I don't think.
Yeah, you got to do that. I'm a big fan of look ahead. Always, like, I know the menu by the time I get to the restaurant in most places I go out to eat.
Yeah, as a formality, I'll pretend to look at the menu as if like just to be somewhat social, like so they don't think I'm a complete like I'm not stalking the restaurant. But yeah, I usually know what I'm gonna eat before I even go in there.
John, is there anything worse than going to a seminar and Mike Ranfone in particular says, "Don't worry, guys, we're gonna have a great meal," and then he brings you to a pizza place with tons of spices, and then you're just SOL.
This is going back to like birthday parties when I was 7 years old. People are like, "Don't worry, we got you," and I'm like, "I don't think you got me," but I'm not going to be the guy that's going to say something, So you always got to plan ahead, especially now. Like I've already scouted out the closest gas station I get like a quick bar at, something that's going to hold me over.
Even at 7 years old, you didn't eat pizza or like it?
No. The first slice of pizza I had, I was 24 years old. It was actually at a Ranfone seminar, and I forget why. It was something where like we wound up talking through lunch instead of like going to. We usually go to that sub shop, DeBella's, I think it is.
Okay.
DeBella's, D'Angelo's. Maybe I forget which one it is, but it's been like probably 4 or 5 years since we were there for a seminar. But there's usually a sub shop I go to, and for whatever reason, we talked through lunch, so I didn't have anything. Like I was straight coffee until like 6 p.m., which I don't normally do. And it was like, all right, I'm gonna try this pizza thing. You know what?
What made you at 24 decide to do that?
That was purely just being really hungry and being like, all right, I didn't plan ahead. It was lack of preparation. And I have had pizza, like actual pizza, I believe I've had 4 times total.
Did you like it? Any of those times? Uh-huh.
No. The second time, it was like a second and third time was like maybe I'll like it better this time. They were all within like a 1 year period, very like adventurous period of my life.
And you're done now?
I'm done now. Yeah.
Okay.
I did find out last night. My parents were actually up in town for the weekend. I did find out last night that my dad has never had a slice of pizza. That came up.
Oh my God. John Senior.
So Doug, since we did skip an intro, instead of doing like a full intro here, let's just give our listeners a chance to try something else out and then come back if they want to. So what podcast have you been on that you feel like gave the best like example or the best like interpretation of who you are and what your body of work is?
It's been, I mean, I haven't done a ton of other people's podcasts lately. I'll just because of like my recency bias, the last podcast that I did, and that was within the last definitely couple of months, if not a couple of weeks, was the Leadership Under Fire podcast. My friend Jason Bresler, who's former Marine, FDNY, he runs this podcast. It just tries to, interviews different people about like what they think makes their organization successful, from like typically like first responders or military. So that was the last one that I did, where I kind of talked about basically everything I've done since college. So Air Force into physical therapy and starting Resilient with Greg and Trevor, who you know.
Cool. So it was Leadership Under Fire podcast?
Yes.
All right, cool. So I'll give that a listen after this, and I encourage our listeners to do so as well if they want like the 10+ minute version of Doug's career.
It's more fun to talk about the things that I don't eat, so you guys can listen to that if you want.
Yeah.
So Doug, you mentioned being in the military. We definitely are going to have some military-based questions.
Okay.
Things that people want to know. So I'm going to kick it off. So let's say it's your 42nd birthday today. All right. So let's say it's your 82nd birthday. All right. It's year 2062. You get contacted by the History Channel to be on some documentary. What is the first story that you're like, all right, I got a cool story for you?
I mean, I wish I could say I had to, because the History Channel is like a very high threshold. Like when I think of the History Channel, I think about like documentaries about like World War II and D-Day. And I mean, I think relative to somebody who wasn't in the military, like I probably have some cool stories, but I don't think anything that I did is History Channel worthy. If any, what would be, History Channel worthy wouldn't be like that I did something like tactically, just like out of the norm. Because I would say that, like, in terms of like the missions that I went on, they're relatively, routine compared to like what other people in my job did. And that's just kind of like luck of the draw. But if they did a documentary on just kind of like the what goes on during like the downtime, and just, when you're not like going on a mission, like you can make like a comedy or a documentary on just like the human side of everything. Like we associate the military with like, you go on a mission, you do these things, and like, here's the strategic objective. But if people saw like what went on, and like just, what people did even when they weren't training or like on their leisure time, and you'd be like, wow, like, and probably what you see in sports and like people you work with, like baseball players, it's like, wow, this is like an exceptionally talented person, but it's also like one of the biggest idiots that I know, and kind of like that dichotomy. So, when you get a bunch of like military guys around, like when they have to get serious, they get really serious, and they tend to be like very good at what they do. But when they don't have to be serious, like I said, they can be some of like just the biggest idiots you've ever met in your life, and including myself. And And the group dynamic, when you have those kinds of people together, would probably lend itself to something interesting if a station like the History Channel wanted to go there. And probably, I'm sure like their advisors would tell them to not touch something like that. But it could be interesting, and maybe I could see like Barstool doing that more than the History Channel.
So, Doug, I want to get into training a little bit. So, you have a great Twitter, and you're pretty active on. And I think you bring a little bit of sense to the field. And just for people who are literally tweeting things to get reactions and to build their own following, and in particular, like things like bilateral deficit and whether you should squat or you squat on one leg. And so, can you just talk about a little bit about people like about that and you know what we should be doing as a field, and where should we actually be putting our focus at if we want to actually get better?
Yeah, I think the social media question is an interesting one. And I mean, like, there's things that go on in our field, and you always see people who are like, they tweet, like, oh, strength and conditioning Twitter is the worst. It's like, that's because that's all but everything is the worst. It's like people are people, and there's a lot of perverse incentives on social media. And like every field, I would imagine, suffers from the same thing. And like the reality is, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, it doesn't matter whether people do bilateral lifts or unilateral lifts. Like, social media, I think, has much more like toxic effects on society in other areas like that. Like, this is an insignificant problem whether people squat or do rear foot elevated split squats. It's like social media is tearing society apart when it comes to like important things. But I think the big thing with social media is, there's some people that it's very clear like want to have these discussions in good faith, and there's some people that are doing it purely for attention. And like, this is just me. If I think that someone's doing something for the latter reason, like they're more of a troll and they're just trying to kind of hack the algorithm and get a bunch of people angry and arguing, like, I will never engage with them, because I think that's rewarding them, and I would never want to reward someone like that. Like, if I think that someone's doing something for not the right reasons, or I just think that like they don't have anything useful to offer, like, I'm not going to engage, because the algorithm doesn't differentiate between somebody doing something that's helping the field, or someone that's just causing the field to yell at each other. And I think, it's like, people are emotional. So when you see someone say something that's like outrageous or very, like dichotomous, like, I only do squats, and the thing is, social media it always takes the worst possible characterization of a group. So it's like, how many people do any of us really know that like only do bilateral lifts or only do unilateral lifts? I mean, even the people that I think, advocate for, say, unilateral lifts and are doing it in good faith, I know that they do some bilateral lifts in their program. They just don't back squat, right? And how many people that would say, okay, like the main lower body lift in my program is a back squat, do no unilateral lifts? Just a question of really more like, where are you putting it in the sequence of your program, right? But I think most people are kind of doing both. And I think ultimately, like, if you have it's more about like how all of your programming interacts, and not like whether you put a squat first or unilateral lift first. I don't think that like, if you're doing everything else quote unquote right, that like that really matters that much. But I think people argue about that stuff because it makes it seem like what we're doing is so important. It's like, oh, like, man, that I've got to figure out like that 0.001% to get an athlete better. And should we do the bilateral lift first, the unilateral lift? Like, I don't think that it matters that much, because I think that it's more about the totality of the program. But, so in reality, I don't think most people are having doing it in this dichotomous way. Like, I don't think that you have someone who's like only doing like squat, bench, deadlift, and clean, and someone who's only doing, like pistol squats, right? So I think it's kind of like when you watch any discussion in social media, especially about things that are more important, like social media makes it seem as though the world is falling apart, right? But then when you go out in the real world, you're like, well, yeah, I mean, there's some shitty things about the world, but it's actually not that bad, But after a while, perception becomes reality, because if you keep telling people that the world is falling apart, eventually they believe it and they act like the world is falling apart. And that's happening to some degree in strength and conditioning, where everyone thinks that, like, there's all these just horrible strength coaches out there that are doing these very like polarizing things. But the reality is, like, it's like any other field. There's people that are really good, really bad, and people that are kind of somewhere in between. And so, but to go back to it, like, I just don't think that, the people that are doing these things for the wrong reasons, or that are trolls, or are trying to have discussions in bad faith, really just to kind of build an audience while everybody else burns the world down. Like, they're never going to get my attention. They're never going to get any engagement. They're not going to get a like or a retweet. I won't even respond in like to criticize them, because it's like, I mean, I think we all have like better things to do than engage with people that we think are doing things for attention. But I think we're just so used to, in the past, up until like very recently, right? Like, there was a scarcity of information, and we always behaved as if like, well, we have to behave as if information is scarce, but now it's so abundant. And I don't think we need to engage with every piece of information that we see, because there's so much of it. And I just don't think that, like, when people get into these, these Twitter fights, like, is anybody really changing their mind? Like, if you truly believe that, the only thing people should do is squat, bench, deadlift, and clean, and you've never, programmed a unilateral lift in any of your routines, like, you kind of, and unless you've been living under a rock, you've been exposed to some of the arguments as to why somebody might want to do a unilateral lift. So it's like, is arguing with somebody on Twitter, like, are you going to run into this person that says something so profound that you haven't seen that you're going to change your mind? Like, most people don't have these discussions and change their mind. They just kind of, it actually makes them, when they get in these fights, it makes them retreat to their like tribe even more. So again, I just like, I think that the best thing that people can do is not engage when people are doing things in this like very polarizing, extreme way. But I don't think a lot of people have like the self-control to do that, because it's like, oh, you're an idiot, and you got to tell them that. But again, I just think you're rewarding them by doing that. I personally don't want to reward that kind of behavior, and I just have better things to do. Because like, once you respond, it's very easy to get sucked in, and I've done it before. I mean, where you just gotta get sucked down that drain. You're like, I've just spent the last like hour arguing with some stranger over something that's so stupid. So I don't know what your guys' like perspective is on that, but yeah, especially now that I got old, I just don't care.
Yeah, I just think it's funny that you see like a Mike Boyle tweet will get like a ton of engagement, and people act like he says something, and it like they get like a visceral reaction from it, right? It's like, Mike Boyle's not going to pay your bills, man. Like, you can still do whatever the fuck you want, and guess what? Like, it'll be totally fine, and Mike Boyle's not going to give a shit about it either.
Yeah, and I think Mike is actually someone that like, he's like genuinely curious, and I think he's actually like interested in having a conversation, and he's a guy that, I mean, yeah, like I would say that he would favor a unilateral lift, but he does cleans in his program. He does trap bar deadlift, so he's just like, maybe like he doesn't back squat in his program unless someone, I guess, like has to do it for a test, but he's doing both, as are probably the people that look at him as if like he only does unilateral lifts. I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he's an example of someone who, I think he likes to be provocative, but I also think that he's doing it kind of for the right reasons. And like, I respect him as a coach. There are people that like I really don't respect, and like they're either blocked or muted on my profile. Like I don't actually care what those people have to say at all. Like Mike, I actually like learn things from, and so even if he might get roped into, I've even messaged him and been like, I don't like, you have a lot of patience with some of these people, because people react very emotionally to him, and I think he might kind of enjoy it in a way. So to each their own.
Doug, so you're somebody who owns your own business. Obviously, you mentioned being 9 to 7, treating people tomorrow. So I know you're still treating people all the time. How do you balance like wearing business owner hat with wearing like trying to be the best practitioner you possibly can?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, luckily I've got 2 people that I can share the business responsibility with. But I mean, I think that what's at least gotten us to this far in terms of our business success has been doing a good job clinically. And I mean, I think business owners should be strategic about what they do, and like, and pursue some kind of like a business education, even if it's something informal. Like we're in a business mentorship group with Danny Mattei and the PT Biz folks. And it's something that like over the last couple of years, we put more of an emphasis on, but we also got to the point that we were pretty successful without doing that. But we also like didn't really know what we were doing. And there was a lot of trial and error. We made some mistakes, and there's things that we could have done better earlier on and been more systematic. But I mean, just speaking for myself, like I enjoy treating and working with people. And I mean, I recognize the importance of the business part, but I don't enjoy it. I don't like it that much, but I know that if I didn't pay attention to it, like I'd be leaving potential on the table, for Resilient. And part of the reason why we kind of do what we do as well is, I mean, like it would be easy for Greg, Trevor, and like we could all like treat on our own and not work together and not have a business and like have a fulfilling life and make a good living. But it's like, it's better to work in a team with people that kind of challenge you. And we started off where it was just the three of us. But there's also some, like if you're in a business for yourself, it's because you think that you have something to offer and that you can do a good job relative to maybe other people in your field. And now that we've like kind of grown to the point where like we can't meet the demand among the three of us, we've brought on other people, and like been able to just make more of an impact on athletes and patients who might have previously had bad experiences with PT. And also, like PT for a lot of people is kind of a disappointment. Like you go to PT school, you're in all this debt. And in a lot of places, like it can be very soul crushing work. I mean, much like being a strength coach, like there's a huge disparity in the settings you can work in terms of like the fulfillment and salary. And I think that, relative to other places, like Resilient is a good place to work. And, like the people that are working with us, I mean, the alternative for them would be to work in like kind of more of a mill or a larger, higher volume clinic. And where I think it's kind of a recipe for burnout and for people to like almost regret the decision they made to make that huge investment in PT school. So, like I like being in business from that standpoint, but I don't necessarily enjoy the like the financial projections and marketing and the promotional stuff. But I'm not naive. Like I recognize that that's very important. And so I think between Greg, Trevor, and I, we have like different skill sets where between the three of us, we can kind of together sort of do the business piece well. But we also, like I said, we're doing this business mentorship where we recognize that it's not our strength. But I mean, if I didn't have to do it, I would love to just treat. But for us to do the things that we want to do and like big picture wise, we do have to split that time. So, I mean, like right now I'm doing like 3 days a week in the city where I'm treating, pretty much 9 to 7 straight through. I'm obviously not working on the business on those days. And then I work 2 days a week in Connecticut from my house where I'm maybe seeing like half that many people, and the other half the day I can do more like big picture stuff. So yeah, I mean, it can be hard to balance because I think most people who get into whether it's strength and conditioning or physical therapy, they didn't do it because they're business minded people. They did it because they want to work with patients or athletes. But if you want to, make more of an impact and create a better life for yourself, like you have to be business minded. So, but finding that balance can be tricky.
So Doug, you don't have to go too in depth, but what does success look like for Resilient? So if you were to have the perfect picture in 3, 5 years, 5, 10 years, where do you see you guys in success, being successful?
Yeah, I mean, that's good because I think we talk about that ourselves, and it's not always, sometimes you get so wrapped up in sort of the day to day that you don't think long term. I mean, we're never going to be the kind of place that has like a million clinics because in terms of scalability, like an at a network or a cash based PT practice, like where it's really much more contingent upon quality than volume, like there's not a way that you can make that like very, very scalable to the point that you have a ton of locations without watering down your products. So we're not interested in that. But I think it's just, like long term. I mean, I think at least Greg, Trevor, and I, we still want to be pretty busy treating, but also, not necessarily need to treat like 10 hours a day to make the kind of living that we want for our family. And so, be able to treat probably like for myself, I would say, ultimately maybe like 20 hours a week, and the other 20 hours kind of just work on creating other opportunities for people within Resilient so that they can, they can build their own caseloads. And, in the military, they call it like a force multiplier. Like you can only do so much on your own, but if you can create opportunities for other people where like they can have fulfilling careers and reach more people. So I think, like probably in the next like 5 years, right now we have 3 locations. I mean, if we could build those locations and maybe along the way have 1 or 2 more and probably I would say like double or triple the amount of therapists that we have working there, I would consider that very successful. But I mean, who knows? Sometimes when you set those very tangible goals, you sort of limit yourself too. But I also look at it like if nothing changed and things stayed exactly the way they were right now, like I'd be happy too. So I'm content, but not totally satisfied. But I think it's also good to look at like where you are. And I think you can be like goal oriented and growth oriented to the point that you're almost neurotic and like you're never happy. And like I feel like, you know, got a good family life. I love where I work, love the people that I work with. So if things didn't change, I'd be happy. But we also think we can do better too. So and we're gonna try to do that.
So Doug, that was an awesome, like probably 15, 20 minutes on training related stuff. We'll get back to training, but one of the staples of this podcast
Let's get weird again. Yeah.
Yeah, let's we're getting a little too serious. So we're
Yeah.
gonna shift gears, have a little fun, then we'll get back to training stuff. So one of the segments on the podcast is gonna be my top 5 in an arbitrary category. All right. And so hopefully something that the guest is into. Eric doesn't know what's coming either, so you guys will guess back and forth on it. It was originally inspired by one of my heroes, Don LaGreca of the Michael K Show. Okay, so the top 5 of the lists I have that I think you'll be really into are my top 5 favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movies.
Okay.
Oh my God.
And so a little background on this. I'm the kind of person that if I want to learn something, I try to just learn as much as I can in a relatively condensed period of time about that thing. And so like I like biographies. Like I like just like diving all in on a topic versus like skimming the surface on 10 different ones. So during the pandemic or when we were shut down, I was looking for like an Audible book. So I listened to Arnold's autobiography, Total Recall. And while I was listening to it, I watched basically every Arnold movie. And so like, he'd talk about a movie in the book and I'd watch it. So I watched probably about 20 to 25. There were a couple that I skipped, a couple that just looked really, really bad, especially when you get to like mid, late 90s Arnold. Like his stuff then on is almost unwatchable.
Yeah.
But so I will give the hint that like nothing on this list is made after 1995 or maybe 94. And so
actually, he was in a lot of. I'm thinking about it, he's in a lot of good movies though.
A lot of good
movies. A lot
movies.
of entertaining stuff.
So I actually think that for the top 5 on this one, for me, it was like a relatively clear, these are the 5 best. And then there's like second and third tier Arnold movies. So I'll open up to either of you guys. Doug, what's your guess as to what is something on my top 5 Arnold?
I'm guessing your top 5 Arnold list.
Yes, my top 5. But you could also debate and say, you know what, like that belongs on the list and here's why. If you name something that's not on mine.
All right. Well, I'm gonna guess. So just one. You want me to guess like your multiple ones on your list?
We'll go back and forth.
You go back and forth. Yeah.
I think you're definitely gonna have Predator on there.
So Predator sneaks in at number 5.
Okay.
Wow.
Don't love Predator. I actually was debating. That was the only spot on my list that I actually debated, maybe including something else. But I was like, all right, Predator has to be a top 5.
I know you're a Terminator 2 guy. I mean, like you're probably gonna have 1 and 2 on there, at least 2.
So Terminator 2 is number 1.
Yeah.
Terminator 1 is number 2.
Okay.
Oh wow.
Those are the best 2. And actually, my opinion on that is if you've never seen either movie, Terminator 1 is better. But in terms of rewatchability, Terminator 2 is just way better.
I would probably agree with that.
Just because Terminator 1 is like so exciting if you've never seen it. But then once you've seen it, it's like relatively predictable. Whereas Terminator 2 has some, throws you for a loophole there with Arnold being the good guy and stuff.
Yeah.
Eric, we got 2 left. We got numbers 3 and 4 left.
Okay. What about Pumping Iron? Does that count?
I thought about it. Even if it does count, I don't think it's a top 5 Arnold movie.
Wow. Okay. Shows how much I know.
Do you have Running Man in there?
Running Man is number 6. I debated Running Man and Predator. Running Man's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, Running Man's great. I thought Predator holds up a little better in terms of like if it's on TV, I'm definitely gonna watch a few scenes of Predator, whereas I might not do that with Running Man. Running Man is basically Hunger Games, but with Arnold instead of Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah.
That's wow. How about Twins?
Twins,
That's
no.
a funny movie. That's a really funny movie, isn't it?
Twins is funny. It's just Arnold's humor stuff is not great.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess that leaves out Kindergarten Cop too.
Leaves out Kindergarten Cop, yeah.
Oh man, those are 2 favorites in my book.
And then I'm guessing you have Total Recall in there then.
No, didn't love Total Recall. Yeah, didn't love Total Recall. Maybe it's the special effects, but it's so over the top. Like that's the one where he's on Mars, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like
Think-
basically it's like he's almost like in a virtual reality type
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
Yep, I remember that. They put him on Mars and he's got to like save the planet or something. Yeah, it's not great.
I
Oh,
don't. Yeah.
Conan the Barbarian.
No, Conan I actually thought was not good. I remember watching that and that was a drag to get through.
Wow. Oh my God.
Yeah, I
Like
mean, it's not a great movie. I don't think John would have it in his top 5. I mean, I
that's
feel like now I've got to start Googling because, like, now
Yeah,
like, we're
I
pretty
have
much
it up.
exhausting a lot of the list, and I'm like, what have I forgotten here that I have to?
so I'll give some clues here.
Okay.
One of them, he's a military guy, an ex-military guy actually.
Oh yeah, with Alyssa Milano. What am I? I'm having a brain fart now.
Actually don't know
Commando.
who the female lead is. It might be her.
Commando.
Commando.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
John Matrix is his
John
character.
Matrix. Yep. That's
Yeah.
just
Okay.
Oh my
a
God.
staple Arnold movie. That's my number 3. He takes on like the whole island, rescues his daughter.
Yeah.
That's a very watchable movie. Like if that's on, I'm watching a few scenes for sure.
Okay.
And then the last one is the most recent one. It's a 1994 movie. It's got Jamie Lee Curtis in it. You guys remember?
Oh, you have Last Action Hero in there. See, I thought that
No,
would be.
it's True Lies.
Oh, True Lies.
True Lies is good.
Okay,
True Lies.
yeah.
True Lies number 4.
Jamie
I
Lee
really-
Curtis
I really like True Lies.
has a phenomenal butt in that movie. She really does. I remember watching that as a kid, and my dad was like, "Cover your face," and it's just her like thong butt was out. I was like, "Oh, that's impressive."
That was that's Tom Arnold's in it. So that one's got a little comedy, but it's still like basic Arnold action hero takes on a bunch of bad guys. Like that's still the premise of the movie.
I think my favorite thing about Arnold is that he had an affair with his maid, and the kid looks like a Latin Arnold. Like it was like the worst kept secret in the world that kid wasn't his son.
That ruined his political career. That was it.
Yeah, he was done after that, man.
Yeah.
When you rate movies, like, I mean, it's very subjective as to how you determine something is a great movie or a better movie than something else. At this point in my life, like when I say, okay, like what are my top however many favorite movies, it comes down to like if I'm flipping through channels and the movie is on, can I resist not watching it?
Yeah.
If a movie is irresistible, no matter how many times I've seen it, that's what vaults it to the top of the list. There's only a handful of movies that are in that category for me. And again, there's so many ways to define, like, how would you say something is the best movie or a great movie? Like, what do you guys do for, it's obviously very subjective and gut feelings, but for me, that's it. It's like that timelessness.
Yeah.
When it's on, like you absolutely have to watch it.
So
Yeah, I've watched Braveheart probably five times in the past 5 weeks, just in various spots.
Yeah, it's a 3-hour movie or whatever. Like when it's on, you like no matter what, if you're 5 minutes in, you kind of have to watch it.
That movie has everything. I think that's number 1 in my book.
Yeah, Braveheart's tremendous. So yeah, rewatchability is huge. So Doug, let me ask you then. So let's say you're supposed to meet your wife out somewhere. You're like, you got an hour to kill, and you're like flipping through the channels. What are the top 3 movies that are most likely to maybe cause you to be late to meeting up with your wife because you got sucked into them?
Well, essentially, you're asking me my 3 favorite movies. I mean, that's another way of asking me that. So, I was kind of hoping you'd ask me that because, I mean, you guys are very well versed in some of these movies, and I'm open to critique. I mean, I would say Top Gun, the first one. I would say Rocky IV, and probably Over the Top.
Over the Top, number 3.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Despite Stallone's son's horrible acting in the movie.
Yeah, it's
he's horrible in that. He's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, he's not always the most likable character, but it's funny on Father's Day, Courtney was like, it's your day, so we'll do whatever you want. So like we did stuff together as a family, like ate dinner together after we put our son to bed, and then I was like, all right, if this is really like my day, I'm gonna make you watch Over the Top with me because I think it's a great father-son movie. And I look forward to the day that when I can watch that with my son, and hopefully I'll never have to like win an arm wrestling tournament in Las Vegas to maintain custody of him. But I mean, I think that what makes that son unlikable is also what makes the movie great. Is that eventually Stallone wins him over.
Okay. Now I had a question. I'm glad you brought up the Rocky series. Something kept popping in my head today. Who do you think wins in a fight, Clubber Lang or Ivan Drago?
Actually,
In
I
a,
think
in
I
a,
think I think Drago I think Drago beats him. I think pretty easily too. I think that yeah. I think when Rocky fought Clubber Lang the first time, he just wasn't in a good place mentally. And he was a little bit complacent.
oh yeah,
But
he wasn't trained. He wasn't training
yeah, I
to
mean,
win.
I think Apollo's a better fighter than Clubber Lang. Certainly Drago. I don't know. What do you guys think?
You think Apollo in his prime would beat Clubber Lang?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah,
watch
yeah, I
if
guess
you watch the
Rocky
Creed
wasn't. He
series,
really
like
wasn't
Rocky
focused.
thinks that
Yeah,
Apollo was in his prime the perfect fighter.
yeah.
I mean,
I
I
guess
think
you guys are
even
right.
prime Creed could have beaten Drago.
John, what do you think about that? Creed,
yeah.
prime.
I'd agree with all of them. Like I don't think Clubber Lang just doesn't have the credible wins on his record. You know, disappeared after losing to Rocky the second time. We never hear from
Yeah.
him again.
Right.
And Drago is 0-0 in professional fights, right? He never became. He beat an old Apollo Creed in an exhibition, and then he fights Rocky and loses in the 15th. And so you got to have Apollo Creed above Ivan Drago.
Yeah, and Gorbachev exiled him after that. Like you have to have some consistency as a champion, longevity.
Yeah, Rocky during his fight camp had a full like carnival while he was getting ready for the Clubber Lang fight. Like that
Yep.
was
Yeah.
that was. How did he think? How did he even think?
Yeah, and
he
he
could
had
go in
and
there like that.
Mickey dies in the beginning of it, and he has Paulie in his corner. Paulie's not a he's not a like a
Right.
fight a ringside cornerman. Like he has no shot to get Rocky.
Yeah, I actually watched 3 the other day, and Rocky is even debating whether he should go fight Clubber Lang. So he was abandoned. The game plan was to take him the distance because once Lang got into deep waters, they didn't think that he would hold up. And I think that Rocky was just trying to finish him early because he was going to make sure that if Mickey was still alive.
Yeah. I
So
think it's
yeah,
amazing. In
there's a
four
lot of stuff
though,
going on there.
like 4, he fights Drago without any sparring partners. Like I think that's pretty, underrated
Well,
part
maybe
of
he
that.
knew.
That
He probably
movie.
knew he was going to go in and do a lot of damage, so he didn't want to take a lot of hits. That's
Right.
my
Yeah.
guess. Which is actually pretty popular in fighting
He
right
was
now.
doing load management before even it was the thing.
But his stressors were high.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. The the timeline of all this is a little questionable, only because I think in one, Rocky's supposed to be like a 31-year-old journeyman, and then like 9 years later, he's like 39 or 40, and then he beats Drago. He's at the top of his game at age 39. So highly questionable in terms of the timeline of all those.
Yeah.
Well, he was self-taught for the first. It's like a guy who hasn't played football before, like Antonio Gates. Like he got better as he got coaching because he was brand new to the sport basically at 31.
He's kind of like Tom Brady before Tom Brady though. Like he peaked in his late 30s.
Yeah, I mean he started taking care of his body for sure.
And these guys now, I mean, you look at like the action actors now, like they're big to the point that it's ridiculous. Like look at the physiques from that era, like Carl Weathers. I mean, like you can't that's like the pinnacle of of
Yeah, it really
performance
is.
right there. Like these people now, I don't know, not to sound like the old salty guy, but you're never gonna top that.
Like Carl Weathers was jacked.
Carl Weathers, Stallone, and like from like the Rocky, like Rambo First Blood Part 2 era.
Yeah, those are great. Like all of those movies have extremely high rewatchability.
Yeah, like do we know more about training now than we did then? Like those guys were doing something right. I would be curious, like what kind of training were Carl Weathers and Stallone doing, during their like the prime of their careers?
Well, the thing that
I'm sure a bunch of people on social media would think it was trash, but can't argue with the results.
the thing that they definitely had, which not everyone now has, is their effort was incredibly high.
Yeah.
Whatever they were doing. Like there's so many people now, and it like seeps down to youth sports where like it's so overthought what they should be doing, the X and O's, that people just miss the fact that like you're losing a lot of training effort by doing a lot of or arguing over minutia.
Yeah,
like,
we could be too smart.
put in, if it's really high effort, like there's an assumption that effort is really high when you debate like the X and O's and like should you be doing this or this. Like they had definite high effort, whereas
Right.
not everyone now. Like I'm just talking like youth sports up to like older like people, middle-aged people training. Like if you have high effort, a lot will start to come out in the wash.
Here's an idea for this podcast, and I think you would be two great people to spearhead this. There's all these books where it's like they get people, like they keep trying to rewrite super training. Like let's get all these authors in the field to create like the best, the optimal training book. They get like the best speed person, the best velocity based training person, the best, maximal strength, mobility, put it all in one book. Forget that. Like let's talk about some of these movies and let's do a book about like, let's find the people, if there's even archives of it, like how did Stallone train for First Blood Part 2? How did Carl Weathers train for Rocky 2? How did Schwarzenegger train for Running Man? Like their programs, and then like dissect the programs. If their coaches are still alive, kind of get some of their philosophies. You have a chapter on like each of these people from the movies that we all admire so much. That in some ways is the ultimate training book. Just pure, nothing theoretical. Like what do these people do?
Yeah, and I honestly, like, you bring on all those experts. That's too many chefs in the kitchen, right? The book, right? Like you get all these people together. Like that's not what is going to get you to the top. But John, you're absolutely right. Those people, I bet you Rocky got trained really hard.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Like all those guys, regardless what they're doing, they work their ass off. And I look at like a lot of our kids today, like the kids we train, and I don't think this is unique to us. And it's like they're so concerned with making sure that like they have the perfect exercises, and part of it's our fault, like selling like, hey, get the perfect program XYZ. That like they're missing the fact that their effort or their attention to detail or how hard they're actually like both mentally and physically, what they're putting in. It doesn't really matter how perfect the program is. Like you're going to get mediocre results because you have mediocre effort, even on the perfect program. So, and that's like a lot of like, Doug, you sent us a great Louis Simmons impression video recently.
Oh.
And like a lot of what I think like West Side's success was their effort was just ridiculously high. And like people have trained using West Side templates forever, but very few people get the results they did. And you could argue like, like the drugs they had or the environment was just that good or whatever, but like the effort was so high. Like their max effort was actually like soul crushing max effort. It wasn't like, all right, that was kind of hard, let me write down my RP is 8 and then I'll come back next week because I want to avoid overtraining or whatever. And it's like these people like were probably on the brink of breaking every week when they trained.
What was the surgery that Louis had where like he showed up after the surgery and the guys were busting his chops like, what's the matter? You're not going to train today? And like, they were kind of like joking around. Louis like, yeah, I'll train. And I think he like might have like busted the sutures or something. I mean, obviously that's the other extreme of it, but
so there's the story in West Side vs. the World, and I know the one you're talking about where he like they take him out of the ICU, they bring him into the gym, they have him bench with just like a dowel rod as like max effort bench day because that's all he could do.
Was it after a pec tear or something, like a pec surgery?
I'm not sure. I feel like it was something internal, like a heart or like organ, something like that. And they had him do like his 3 sets of 3 with the dowel rod, and they brought him back to the hospital.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, guys, like you are being a physical therapist and being where you are, John, you're dealing with people who are looking for answers. And it's just funny you said the part about just the mental energy that it takes if you're worrying about this great program and you're just not trying hard enough. Like if you're worrying about that, you can't possibly train hard enough to get the results that you need to go. But if somebody's just kind of like a cowboy and just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go deadlift as much weight as possible today, and I might not feel good afterwards, but I'm gonna give my best effort. Like that's the guy you're gonna put your chips on, right?
So I've had this conversation with our interns like a bunch of times, but like I would much rather train the person who's like borderline an idiot and like gonna be like all right, I need to make sure this guy doesn't get hurt in the weight room, I would much rather train that person than the person who is like extremely meticulous and making sure they feel their big toe when they do like some mobility drill or whatever. Like give me the guy who I have to hold back over the guy who I have to teach effort 10 days out of 10.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in the physical therapy world, because there's so much obsession with like movement perfection. And like I'm not one of these people that like it's like it doesn't matter how you move, because there's people who are like, oh, it doesn't matter like how you do an exercise or how you run. It's all about load management and progressive overload. And as long as you use the right progressions, like how you execute the task doesn't matter. I'm definitely not on that end of the spectrum, but I also see people all the time who are so obsessed with how they move to the point that it's almost like there's some like almost like clinical anxiety or neuroticism there. Those people are very hard to work with, because I mean I'm okay working with them, but it's hard for them to overcome that, because they're almost like they're so fearful of doing things the quote unquote wrong way that they're never going to like have any output. And in some cases, like all they need is just like, you need some output, you need some fitness, you just need to do some kind of movement to get over this fear that because you're in this cycle where you're just afraid to move, and your obsession with moving perfectly makes the threshold to move so high that it creates this vicious cycle. Whereas the person, I think, who's, like you said, kind of like a little bit more of a meathead, I think it's easier to rein those people in than it is to take someone who's like very, very fearful and very obsessed with moving quote unquote perfectly and getting them to just, hey, like just put your foot on the gas. It's harder to ramp those people up than it is to take the meatheads and kind of throttle them down a little bit. Because you can still get someone who wants to trade hard and just say like, look, like, let's just do this. You can still train hard, like, and have the same whatever RPE, but like, let's execute the task a little bit differently, or just do a different exercise. But like, you're still going to feel at the end of the set like you worked very hard, and that's just limited to your creativity as a coach. But people who are kind of afraid to move or just want to do it perfectly, it's, you run out of options, because everything to them is just like can be so cerebral. And it's our own fault as a profession for creating that.
Yeah, I was just gonna touch on that, Doug. What do you now, as a if you were talking to a young physical therapist, and a lot of stuff that you see on social media in physical therapy, you see a lot of low level drills that they look cool, and the person that's posting about it has all these very complex explanations on why they're doing it and what they're looking to gain out of it. But oftentimes those people are doing those low level activities for like a really long time, and when they get thrown back into sports, they're kind of fucked, right? Because they spend a lot of time doing things that haven't prepared them to get ready. So and I think what makes Resilient so unique is that you guys are, along with being great therapists who can execute all those low level activities, you also are all tremendous strength coaches who understand performance. So can you talk about like a little bit how maybe if you were stuck in kind of the posting side of those low activities, and how you kind of got out of it, and how you would talk to a young professional on how to like stay away from that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is like you don't really get the end stage rehab stuff in PT school, so they don't know any better. And a lot of a lot of those exercises are popular because they're easy to research. And like an EMG study, it's like why are clamshells so pervasive? It's because someone did a study, or multiple people did a study, that showed that like you get a high EMG activity in the glute max with a clamshell. But it's like, and you can quantify that, and it's like, oh, well, high EMG is good, but like, is that really what you care about? Like, as your athlete, when they want to be confident in whatever sport, like, do they care about having high EMG in their glutes, or do they want to be able to essentially reverse engineer their sport? And I mean, I think that you can take the reverse engineering stuff too far as well, because then you get kind of caught up in like everything has to be very like specific, versus I think the goal of physical therapy is, or even strength and conditioning, is just make sure that they don't have a physical limitation that prevents them from executing a skill under the conditions of the game, whether that's at like high force, high speed, in different environmental conditions. And that's why, like, when people say like, oh, well, like doing a back squat's not specific. It's like, well, who cares? Like, what's specific? I mean, if we're really going off specificity, we'd have a very limited menu of things to do, because then you just say like, let's just play the sport and use progressive overload in the sport where you manipulate practice. But if that's all you did, then I don't think people wouldn't be able to train their physiology, their biomechanics enough to have a buffer for skill execution. So, when it comes to the end stage rehab, there's no to say, well, we have physical therapy and rehab, we have strength and conditioning. Those are more like legal terms, right? It's scope of practice, but the athlete doesn't care about that. I mean, I would tell anybody don't violate your scope of practice. But a lot of times when people say oh, well, physical therapists shouldn't be doing strength and conditioning coaches shouldn't be doing rehab. Yeah, don't break the law, but all that matters is the athlete prepared or not. And a lot of times when people say that, it's not because they really care about the athlete or the patient's safety. It's because they want to monopolize market share and they don't want competition. And I think we need competition is the best thing for the consumer, because now you've got more people trying to solve a problem at different price points, and kind of the market can sort that out. So as long as people aren't breaking any laws, I think there needs to be more competition. I think that physical therapists shouldn't be monopolizing the rehab process, because they're not really doing that great a job of it. But in their defense, they don't get a lot of the end stage rehab stuff. So you shouldn't have to learn about strength and conditioning to become a better physical therapist. The problem is there's nothing in physical therapy education that talks about real progressions to get people back to sport. So physical therapists have to defer to the field of strength and conditioning to learn more about what end stage rehab really is, because you can't just do clamshells and some leg extensions and then say okay, you're fine to go play your sport. There's a lot more that goes into it. And a lot of it's driven by the healthcare system, and you only have a finite amount of visits, and insurance companies are only going to reimburse so much. But what really matters is the athlete prepared or not? And do you have the knowledge to get the athlete from point A to point B? And I know a lot of strength coaches outside of that very, very acute, when not the first couple of weeks after a surgery, but after that, say, a month out from an ACL, I would actually trust some very competent strength coaches more with an ACL rehab than I would physical therapists, because I know that at least the strength coaches are going to load them. Physical therapy is a field, I mean, I'm generalizing, but it tends to underload people, and underloading can be as dangerous as overloading, because when you overload someone and you hurt them, it's a very obvious cause and effect. When you underload somebody, you don't really see it. They're not going to get hurt, in your facility, but they might get hurt when they play, because they just can't withstand the demands of the game because they weren't loaded sufficiently. So I don't know if that answered your question, but you have to have the awareness of what the athlete really needs to be prepared for their sport. And if you're not getting it in your formal education, you've got to find wherever you can to get that information, whether it's from a strength coach, from physical therapists who are doing it. It could even be from a sport coach or a track coach, because no one field has a monopoly on all this knowledge, but the knowledge is out there and it's multidisciplinary. So it's yours for the taking, but you have to know where to look.
So Doug, this has been awesome. We're probably about an hour in, so we'll wrap it up here within the next couple questions. But we are going to have Trevor Rappa, Greg Spatz, Cody Benz, who also works with you guys, on the podcast coming up in the next probably month or two. So we'll rapid fire them. Let's say you're in our shoes. You have to ask those guys a question. What question are you asking Trevor that's going to cause some good or create some good conversation that's funny? What question are you asking Greg? What question are you asking Cody?
Before I answer that, I remember when we talked about this, and I said my only stipulation is that I want to ask you guys one question, since we got into food.
Okay, yeah, we're ready
and
for that.
This is a fun one that I like. So if you had to cook one meal for a ruthless dictator, say you had to but when he was alive, you had to cook a meal for Saddam Hussein, and if he didn't like the meal, he was going to make you walk off of a platform diving board into a pool with no water, or the consequence of if he's not satisfied with the meal, you're dead. So you've got one meal, and basically to save your own life. And to make it easy, I'm gonna say the dictator doesn't have any weird food preferences. He or she will eat we'll eat anything as long as it's made well. Yeah, what would you guys say would be that meal to save your life? And you'll get the
John, you're
finest
dead.
ingredients. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how expensive they are. Like they will provide you with all the raw materials to make the meal, but you ultimately have to make the meal.
So,
And you don't have the internet to look it up. You have to go with something that's like
something off the top of my head. So, all
Yeah.
right. So this is just like training, right? So in terms of how we talk about like the execution of the exercise matters a lot more than the exercise, or it can matter a lot more than the exercise. So you got to cook something that you know is going to be a great meal, even if you're a couple percent, either way off from cooking it. So it'd be nice to say like some kind of like good steak and like potato dish and whatnot, but there's too much variability in the steak, right? You could have like that steak is way overcooked, it's way underdone, that's not how he likes it. So in my head, and this is not necessarily my favorite meal, it's not something that I would eat, but I think you got to look up like what a Big Mac or what a Whopper looks like and be like, hey, this is a fine American dish and you can cook this, right? And so like you look up whatever's in a Big Mac.
No, you have to. This is something you can't
research it. Like it's got to be something that you can make right now without like.
You're in a kitchen and you have access to. You don't have the internet. You don't even have a cookbook. You just have all the things that are in a kitchen.
Okay, so it's got to be like a burger because that's easy to cook, right? It's got to be a burger, and there's got to be bacon involved, all right? Because you can cook bacon. It's really hard to screw up bacon unless it's like really undercooked and like kind of like squishy, like it's got to be crispy. But if you made Saddam or someone else like that a burger with bacon, I have a tough time believing you can really mess that up.
Okay. What about you, Eric?
So I'm actually a pretty good cook and I can cook. I have about 5 things that I know if I make somebody, they'll be like, oh, this is pretty good. So I'm going to go with something I've made for the longest amount of time, and that would be my ground bison chili. It takes about 2 to 3 hours to make, and there's got to be a layer of cheddar cheese in the bottom and a layer of cheddar cheese on the top. Now, if Saddam Hussein has the palate of John, he'll absolutely hate this dish.
No, he's like, I mean, they're open to anything. It just has to be good.
Yeah, no. Then it would be my ground bison chili.
Okay.
Yeah,
John, you would hate this because it is just filled with flavor.
When I remember some Sunday mornings when you were making it, like leading up to like the Jets games at 1:00. I remember thinking that's not something I'm going to eat.
I made wings for John. And they were they were just like a honey barbecued wing. And I looked over and he was beet red. And he was like, oof, these things are spicy. And they just had like regular barbecue sauce on it. So that gives you a taste of John.
But to answer your question about what I asked those guys, just ask each of them what's grinding their gears these days. That's because they all got something that's grinding their gears. Real time.
Yeah. One of the things that makes you very different from those guys is you're a lot less angry, or you're a lot less outwardly angry.
I would say more outwardly.
Yeah, you're a lot less outwardly angry. So like there's less things that really irritate you. Like I feel like talking to those guys, I genuinely think that there are nights where it's like 10:30 at night, their head's on the pillow looking up at the ceiling, and they're like frustrated by an Instagram post that has absolutely nothing to do with them. Whereas I picture you as a guy like, all right,
your head hits the pillow, you're going to bed.
Yeah, 9:30 hits, and you're like, all right, this is out of sight, out of mind. On to the next thing.
I've made an effort to like not look at that stuff. The only time I see it is when people send it to me at this point, and sometimes it can be more comedic. Like I don't really get mad about it because it can be a dark place.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm looking forward to having those guys on, and we'll get this one up and going, and hopefully people enjoy it, see a different side of you, and hopefully maybe we'll have a round 2, sometime down the road.
Round 2 is definitely as long as we didn't offend you, Doug. I would hope you.
No, I mean we can get as weird as you guys want. There's a lot we could talk about. I don't know if people care about it, but you ask me a question, I'll answer it.
I do think we could get a great discussion going if we really analyze like what happens if we do an entire podcast like on the Rocky series, like we get my friend Tim Jeremini on, who's obsessed with the Rockies. We get Tim Laffey on, who's obsessed with the Rockies. We get Doug on, and we really dissect the entire series. I think that could be a great hour.
I'd also love
Rocky.
to do an episode where we talk about like some of the, like the great like kind of masters and mentors in some of these 80s movies. And, we compile a list of like the five best, and it's like, who do we think is the best, or what are the great qualities of each, like Mickey, Mr. Miyagi, the Shidoshi from Bloodsport, and some other people. I mean, because people are doing all this like leadership stuff now. Like I just happened to be flipping through channels and Karate Kid 3 was on yesterday. I mean, it's like, imagine having someone like Mr. Miyagi as a mentor. This humble karate master was also a Medal of Honor winner in World War II. And it was like fatalistic where I happened to flip on the part where Daniel was handing Mr. Miyagi the paperwork to sign to defend his title at the All Valley Karate Tournament. And Mr. Miyagi wouldn't sign it. And he was just like, karate is for life and for honor. Like, you fight for life and your honor. Like, when you fought the first time in the tournament, it was to defend your honor because you were being picked on by the Cobra Kai. Now you don't need to do that. And of course, like, that wasn't satisfying to Daniel's son, but like these lessons, like, were instilled in us at a very young age. And the books could be written. You could have college courses, master classes, as they're called now, on some of the lessons these great leaders exhibited. So that could be, I mean, there's so many directions this podcast can go. It's your show, but I feel like you guys are some of the great minds when it comes to this stuff. So you're very well educated in it.
So maybe going back to one of my earlier questions, like, when you're in your 80s, this is what the History Channel is going to bring you on for, and you're going to talk about the great fictional mentors of the 20th century America.
And I hope their legacy is live on. I hope people know who Mr. Miyagi is and whatever.
I mean, Mr. Miyagi's got to be at the top of that list, right? Like, Mr. Miyagi never gave up on Daniel-san, but like, Mickey kind of like used Rocky, right, to bring him to the top.
Yeah, he told him he's too old. He just doesn't have it anymore, And 3,
and then he pleaded when he had the shot. When Rocky had the title shot, he pleaded that he would train him after he kind of like kicked him out of the gym.
Yeah, he did. He did tell him to fight right-handed, and 2. That was that won him it might have won him that fight. Protected his eye.
Yeah, that was good.
That's one of the big loopholes in the whole series. He fights one fight right-handed and then goes back to being lefty. His eye's just totally fine.
He has 10 more fights. Actually, what do you have? He has 13 more fights and no talk of the eye.
No talk of the eye. Yeah, the eye was fine after that.
He couldn't see.
The attention to detail here. That's why you guys should tune in to this podcast. They don't miss anything.
All right, Doug. Hey, this has been awesome. We'll talk soon, and enjoy your 9 to 7 tomorrow. And if people are really interested, rewind and try to follow Doug's day in terms of what he's eating at what time.
Yep. Eat along.
Thank you so much, Doug.
All right, night, guys.
Hey, thanks, Doug.